Potential British monarchs rejected for George I. Thank you to Midas Merge for sponsoring this video. In 1700, 11-year-old Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, lay dying while his mother Anne watched in anguish. He had suffered since birth with a host of inbreeding-related health problems, but this time the doctor's bleeding and blistering did nothing to help. His death was not only a tragedy for his parents, it was a crisis for the kingdom. He had been the last hope for the Stuart Dynasty. His uncle, the recently widowed King William III, was childless. Next in the succession was his mother, Anne. At 35, she might have had more children, but after losing 17 babies to miscarriage, stillbirth, and disease, no one wanted to see her suffer more tragedies, least of all her doctors. With no other heirs, Parliament needed a solution post-haste. They didn't want to go the way of Spain, which was currently being torn apart by war over the throne left vacant by tragically inbred Carlos II. The royal family tree was studied to determine who was next in line. The problem was that they were all Catholic. Only 15 years earlier, Anne's father, James II, had been kicked off the throne for converting, and his Protestant people wouldn't stand for another Catholic king. The succession skipped over 41 closer relations until they got to the nearest living Protestant, Sophia, Electress of Hanover. The Act of Settlement of 1701 declared that all future British monarchs must be her descendants. She ended up dying before Anne, and the throne went to her son, George I. But who were the 41 royals who got rejected? French princes, Italian kings, a queen of Spain, and a couple of Holy Roman Empresses. Let's meet the fascinating potential British monarchs that never were. For this list, we're only looking at people who were alive in 1701. According to the rules of male preference primogeniture, technically, one person should have outranked Anne in the succession, her younger brother, James Francis Edward Stuart. His birth in 1688 caused his father's downfall. The English tolerated King James II's Catholicism because when he died, his two Protestant daughters would inherit the throne. But when his second wife gave birth to a healthy son who would outrank his sisters and be raised Catholic, the people were outraged. Rumors ran wild that the real royal infant had been stillborn, and a changeling was smuggled into the birthing chamber in a warming pan. Parliament invited James's eldest daughter, Mary, and her husband, William of Orange, to take the throne. James, his wife, and son were chased out of the country. While exiled in France, the family lived as guests of Louis XIV. He bankrolled the Jacobites' attempts to retake the British throne. When James II died in 1701, many considered his son the rightful King James III of England and VIII of Scotland. British politicians secretly advised him that if he converted to Protestantism, he could reclaim his father's throne, but he refused and plotted more bloody invasions. He sailed to Scotland, but icy weather gave him a fever, and he returned to France. The Scottish rebels who had been willing to die for him were crestfallen by his cowardice, and the French refused to welcome him back. James moved to Rome, where the Pope offered him a villa. Though he lived in splendor and married the granddaughter of the King of Poland, Maria Sobieska, he was melancholy. He continued to hold court and grant his supporters bogus titles. He died at 55, and his son, Bonnie Prince Charlie, took up the Jacobite cause, eventually leading 2,000 Scots to their massacre at the Battle of Culloden. Next in the line of succession was James's younger sister, Louisa Maria. She was raised with every expectation that her family would return to London in glory. She was called Princess Royal and Princess Over the Water. She enjoyed dancing and opera and was popular at the French court. She turned down proposals from Prince Charles, Duc de Berry, and King Carl II of Sweden. Louisa Maria died of smallpox at 19. Next, we go up a generation to James II's siblings. His older sister, Mary, Princess of Orange, had a son who was alive in 1701, but he was already warming the throne as William III. His powerful army allowed him to skip the line and claim a co-monarchy with his wife and first cousin, Mary II. Next is James II's younger sister, Henrietta. She was wed to Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, younger brother to King Louis XIV. He was flamboyantly bisexual and got her pregnant 8 times. She also had affairs with men and women at court, but she died of peritonitis at 26. Only one of her children was alive in 1701. Anne Marie, Queen of Sardinia, was 10 months old when her mother died. She was close to her stepmother, Elizabeth Charlotte. At 14, she wed her uncle, Victor Amadeus II, Duke of Savoy. He was annoyed that she gave birth to 4 daughters before a son, and he was frequently unfaithful. In the War of Spanish Succession, he sided with the Habsburgs against her family. She had little choice but to support him. The peace treaty granted him the Kingdom of Sicily, though in 1720 he was downgraded to King of Sardinia. Anne-Marie died at 58. In 1701, 4 of her 8 children were alive. Victor Amadeus, Prince of Piedmont, and his siblings were personally raised by their mother, extremely unusual for royals at the time. Matches were considered with princesses from Portugal, Parma, and the Holy Roman Empire. Instead, he died of smallpox at 15. Charles Emmanuel III became heir after his brother's death. His father neglected his education, then grew depressed and abdicated. But the retired king soon returned and tried to take back the throne. Charles had his father arrested. He had 3 wives who all died young and fathered 10 children. Charles Emmanuel lived to 71. Maria Adelaide was 11 when she was sent to France to marry Louis XIV's grandson, Louis, Duc de Burgundy. The lively princess was a breath of fresh air at Versailles and was also a keen political player who orchestrated the downfall of 2 enemies. It was said that she was the only woman, aside from his own mother, that Louis XIV admired. In 1711, her father-in-law died and her husband became Dauphin. During the mourning procession, the family caught measles. Zealous doctors bled and blistered them, increasing their suffering. The couple and their second son died within days of each other. Marie Adelaide was 26. Her youngest son, the future Louis XV, survived because his nurse hid him from the doctors. Maria Luisa Gabriela was 13 when she was wed to King Felipe V of Spain. Because his faith prevented him from sexual acts outside of marriage, he insisted on his conjugal rights nightly. He was completely infatuated with his wife. She was benevolent and a competent regent when he was at war. She gave birth to 4 sons, 2 of whom were kings of Spain. At 25, Maria Luisa fell ill with tuberculosis. As she lay dying, her husband continued marital relations until the death rattle escaped her lips and priests and courtiers pulled him off her. All of these historic games played for the throne were stressful and sometimes deadly. But if you'd like to play a fun and relaxing game with a golden touch, try Midas Merge. This Merge 3 game allows you to combine creatures and treasures strategically, complete quests, and harness the sun's energy to dispel the darkness cast by Nyx, the goddess of the night. Progress through the levels and uncover rich lore and secrets hidden within the Garden of Gold, while you help Queen Laia and King Midas in their quest to illuminate the realm. Midas Merge combines an engaging fantasy narrative with beautiful and adorable graphics, created by the design team that brought us Sims 3 and 4. Plus, it's free to download, and you can play offline wherever you want. Discover your next favorite royal game. Download Midas Merge for free via my link or QR code. And now, back to history. Next, we go up 3 generations to Charles I's siblings. He had an older brother, Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales, who would have been king had he not died of typhoid fever at 18. Charles had a younger brother, Robert, and 4 sisters, Elizabeth, Margaret, Mary, and Sophia. Most died in infancy. His only sibling who lived to have children, many children in fact, was his older sister, Elizabeth. She was born in Scotland and named in honor of her father's cousin, Elizabeth I, in his attempts to butter her up so that he would be named heir. Once king, James was unpopular with Catholics in England. The conspirators of the Gunpowder Plot attempted to blow up the king and parliament and kidnap 9-year-old Princess Elizabeth, place her on the throne, and forcibly raise her Catholic. But the plot was foiled and the conspirators executed. At 17, she wed Prince Frederick V, Elector of the Palatinate, a state within the Holy Roman Empire. During the 30 Years' War, the couple were elected King and Queen of Bohemia. Their reign began in November 1619, but ended 1 year later, so Elizabeth was known as the Winter Queen. She gave birth to 13 children, 11 of whom survived. During the restoration of her nephew Charles II, widowed Elizabeth moved back to London. She died at the age of 65 and was buried in Westminster Abbey. She and most of her children had died by 1701, but her son, Charles I Louis, had a living daughter who comes in at number 9. Elizabeth Charlotte was nicknamed Lisolette. When she was 4, her father divorced her mother and married a lady-in-waiting. Little Lisolette was raised by her aunt, Sophia of Hanover. At 18, she became the second wife of Philippe I, Duke of Orleans. There were rumors that he had poisoned his first wife, Henrietta of England, but the petrified Princess Bride had no say in the marriage or converting to Catholicism. Had she been wed to a Protestant, she likely would have been the progenitor of a new British dynasty. Philippe didn't poison her, but he did spend all of her money buying luxuries for his male lovers, while leaving their children without enough food to eat. Lisolette was kind, good-natured, and beloved by her stepchildren and the king. Her husband died of a stroke, and the merry widow enjoyed 21 years on her own. 2 of her children were alive in 1701. Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, fought against the English in the War of the Grand Alliance and of the Spanish Succession. He was forced to wed his uncle's favorite illegitimate daughter, Françoise Marie. He felt that she was beneath him, and he neglected her and gained a reputation for drunken licentiousness. In 1715, Louis XIV died, and Philippe was appointed regent for his 5-year-old great-nephew, Louis XV. His regency was a disaster. He was more concerned about securing his own place as heir than in governing. He crippled the government and the economy with wars and poor decisions. He was removed from power and died months later at 49. His daughter, Louise Elizabeth, wed her cousin, Charles Duc de Berry. The 16-year-old heavily pregnant princess was aboard a barge that hit a bridge and nearly sank. She was rescued, but the stress caused her to deliver a stillborn daughter. Her second child died soon after birth. Louise and her husband were miserable and both took lovers. But Charles kicked her in public for her indiscretions. She and her lover plotted to flee the country, but they didn't have to. The Duke died after a hunting accident, leaving his wife a merry widow. Her father gave her a Luxembourg palace, and she enjoyed balls, operas, gambling, and several lovers. Her 3 pregnancies caused scandals. Voltaire penned the play Oedipus as a thinly veiled allegory implying that Louise Elizabeth's children were the result of an incestuous relationship with her father. The entire court attended a public performance, and the heavily pregnant Dowager Duchess fainted to the vicious delight of the crowd. Following a difficult labor, during which her priest refused to absolve her, she died at 23. Adelaide was the most beautiful of the Duke's 6 daughters, but she was more interested in music and science and turned down several proposals. She fell in love with a chevalier who rescued her during a hunting accident, but her parents refused to allow her to marry beneath her, so she became a nun and abbess of Chelles. She built a hospital and a school for girls. She died of smallpox at 44. Charlotte Aglaé had an affair with the Lothario, Duc de Richelieu. He also seduced her cousin. He was arrested as part of a court intrigue, and Charlotte begged her father to pardon him. Instead, he married her off to Francisco, Duke of Modena, in Italy. The marriage was a failure. She was blamed for failing to produce an heir, and when the Duc de Richelieu came for a visit, they resumed their affair. Charlotte eventually gave her husband 10 children. When he died, she was free to travel Europe. At 14 is Elizabeth Charlotte. She was forced to wed Leopold, Duke of Lorraine, as part of a peace treaty. Her family mourned her union with a lower-ranking prince, but she and Leopold fell in love and lived happily with their 14 children. The eldest princess, Elizabeth Gabrielle, was born by 1701, but she died of smallpox at the age of 10. Elizabeth Charlotte encouraged her husband to burn 280 Protestants and Jews at the stake. When he died, she was regent for their son, Francis. He married future Holy Roman Empress Maria Theresa and gave up Lorraine, but he moved his mother to Commercy and made her sovereign princess. She died at 68. Elizabeth of Bohemia's next son to reproduce was Edward, Count Palatine of Simerne. He died in 1663, and his daughter Louise Marie died in 1679. But her son, Louis Otto, who inherited the minor principality of Salm in modern-day Belgium, and her daughter, Eleanor Christine, who married the Duke of Ursel, were in the British line of succession in 1701. At 18 is Anne Henriette, who had an illustrious marriage to Henri Jules, Prince of Condé, one of the highest-ranking nobles in France. He suffered from clinical lycanthropy, a rare psychiatric syndrome in which one has delusions that they can transform into an animal. He often flew into rages and beat her and their children. Anne Henriette outlived him and enjoyed a quiet retirement to the age of 74. She had 10 children, all of whom were below average height and had kyphosis, more commonly known as a hunchback. 4 were alive in 1701. Louis III, Prince of Condé, had macrocephaly. He was well educated, but was, quote, not burdened with too much intelligence for his time or station in life. He married Louise Françoise, one of Louis XIV's illegitimate daughters, and they had 9 children. Like his father, Louis was consumed by mental illness in his later years. He died at 41. His son, Louis Henri, was on the Regency Council of Louis XV, but in his youth he was more interested in hunting, gambling, and doing whatever his mistress said. Later, he was appointed chief minister. He raised taxes and increased police measures. Already unpopular, he broke the king's engagement to Infanta Maria of Spain because she was too young to reproduce, and arranged a marriage to Maria Leszczyńska of Poland instead. Spain was furious and allied against France. Louis Henri was sacked and spent the rest of his life in the country. Charles, Count of Charolais, was a soldier. He never married but fathered illegitimate children. Marie Anne Eleanor was abbess of Saint-Antoine-des-Champs. Louise Elizabeth wed her cousin, Louis Ormond, Prince of Conti, but she was often unfaithful. He died, leaving her in debt. In exchange for solvency, she agreed to present Louis XV's mistress, Madame de Pompadour, at court. Louise Anne was another romantic conquest of the Duc de Richelieu. She and her cousin Charlotte were romantic rivals. Louise never married, but she was very close to her cousin, Louis XV, and it was rumored that she was his first lover. Marie Anne secretly wed her lover, Louis, Duke of Joyeuse, and they were childless and happy. During a hunting party, he disappeared in the woods and his body was never found. Distraught, Anne-Marie never married again. She was appointed head lady-in-waiting to Queen Maria Leszczyńska. At 26 is Marie-Thérèse. She wed François Louis, Prince of Conti. She was passionately in love with him, while he was more interested in his male lovers. Louis XIV offered François the throne of Poland, but when he arrived, he discovered Augustus II had already forced his way onto it. Marie-Thérèse outlived her husband, but he left her a parting gift: syphilis. Louis Ormond, Prince of Conti, was considered very unattractive. He married his cousin Louise Elizabeth and was heartbroken when she was unfaithful. He doubted the paternity of their 5 children. He left home to fight in the War of Spanish Succession, but was a failure as a soldier as well. He died of a chest infection at 31. Marie Anne married her cousin Louis Henri, Duke of Bourbon. They had no children and she died at 30. Louise Adelaide never married and died of smallpox at 54. At 30 is Louise Benedicte, who was born with a paralyzed arm. She was witty but had a terrible temper. She was very small, vain, and wore a lot of makeup, so she was nicknamed La Poupée du Sang, the doll of the blood. She wed Louis XIV's illegitimate son, Louis Auguste, Duke of Maine. One of his legs was shorter than the other, and the disabled couple were bullied. This caused resentment to grow between them. Louise ridiculed her husband for his lack of ambition, and both had affairs. She pressured him to join a court conspiracy, but the plot was discovered and he was imprisoned for 5 years. She was ashamed of having instigated his downfall. When he was released, they retired to the country and lived peacefully together. The couple did agree on their love for their 7 children, 2 of whom had been born by 1701. Louis Auguste, Prince of Dombes, was a renowned military commander in the wars of Polish and Austrian succession. He never married, but was killed in a duel at 55. Louis Charles, Count of Eu, was also unmarried. He spent most of his time hunting and lived to 73. Marie Anne married Louis Joseph, Duke of Vendôme. 2 days after the wedding, he left her for his male lover. She renovated her Paris mansion and died at 40. Number 34 is Benedicta Henrietta. She married Johann Frederick, Duke of Brunswick-Luneburg. He was the same age as her father and in desperate need of an heir. Benedicta gave birth to 4 daughters, so when her husband died, the Duchy of Brunswick went to his younger brother, Ernst Augustus of Hanover, the husband of her aunt, Sophia. Benedicta moved back to Paris and lived to 78. 2 of her daughters survived to 1701. Charlotte Felicita wed Rinaldo d'Este, Duke of Modena. She died giving birth to her 7th child. The 3 who were born by 1701 were Francisco, Duke of Modena. His duchy was bankrupt by the wars of Spanish, Polish, and Austrian succession, and he was forced to sell his Renaissance masterpieces. He wed Charlotte Auglay d'Orléans. Benedicta's cousin, James Francis Edward Stuart, fell in love with her, but her father refused the match. She never married but lived to 80. Amelia secretly married the Marquis de Villeneuve, but he was killed in battle and she never remarried. She lived to 78. 39 is Wilhelmina Amalia. She was introduced to Holy Roman Empress Eleanor Magdalena of Nuremberg, who was so charmed that she determined the beautiful princess would be the one to temper her son's womanizing. She did not. Archduke Joseph continued to jump into bed with anything in a gown. Wilhelmine delivered 3 children, but her only son, Leopold, died of hydrocephalus. She contracted syphilis from her cheating husband and was left infertile. Wilhelmine Amalia was Holy Roman Empress for 6 years. When Emperor Joseph fell ill with smallpox, he swore to his wife that if he survived, he would remain faithful. But he died at 32, passing the throne to his brother, Charles VI. He also had only daughters and vowed to his father that he would allow Joseph's 2 daughters to reign first. Instead, he spent his reign trying to secure the succession of his own child, Maria Theresa. Wilhelmina Amalia enjoyed 30 years of widowhood and died at 68. Maria Josepha wed Frederick August II, Elector of Saxony. He was elected king of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1733. Maria Josepha attended Mass 4 times a day and was lectured by her own priest for being too religious. But she spoke against the persecution of non-Catholics and gave alms to the poor of all faiths. She had an astonishing 26 children, though 12 were miscarried or stillborn. She was politically active and advised her husband. She died of a stroke at 57. Maria Amalia got on well with her husband, Charles Albert, hereditary Prince of Bavaria, and had 7 children. When her uncle Charles VI died, her husband claimed the throne in her name. Her sister Maria Josepha renounced her claim in her favor. The electors chose to back Charles and Maria Amalia, who were crowned Holy Roman Emperor and Empress in 1742. But Maria Theresa did not give up the fight. Thus ensued the War of Austrian Succession. Charles, bedridden by gout, died at 48. On the brink of defeat, Maria Amalia convinced her son, Maximilian, to give up their claim and make peace. Maria Theresa became uncontested Holy Roman Empress, and Maria Amalia retired and founded a hospital. At 42 is Elizabeth of Bohemia's daughter, Louise Hollendyne. She was a talented artist and portrait painter. She fell in love with James Graham, a Scottish soldier and poet. He fought for King Charles I, but when he was defeated, Parliament ordered him hanged, drawn, and quartered. Devastated, Louise converted to Catholicism and took holy vows as a nun. She became abbess of Montbisson. In 1701, Louise was 79 and the oldest person in the line of succession. But her status as a childless Catholic nun caused the British to skip her in favor of her younger sister. Sophia was exceptionally intelligent and well-read. In her youth, she was courted by her cousin, the future King Charles II of England. Instead, she wed Ernst August, Duke of Brunswick-Leinburg, and Prince Elector of Hanover. She gave birth to 7 children and took great interest in their education. She was widowed in 1698. In 1700, the 70-year-old princess met with her cousin, King William III of England, at Hetloo Palace in the Netherlands. William and Sophia conversed in their shared native tongue, Dutch, and he was impressed by her. A year later, Sophia got the official word that she had been named second in line to the British throne, after her cousin Anne, who inherited in 1702. Politicians were eager to move the healthy and lively 83-year-old Electress to London, so she could assume the throne immediately after the death of sickly, obese 49-year-old Anne. Deeply offended, Queen Anne sent a furious letter to her cousin, accusing her of plotting to steal the throne. 3 days after reading the distressing letter, Sophia was walking in the gardens when the sky suddenly opened in a violent downpour. She raced for shelter and then collapsed, dying in her granddaughter's arms. 2 weeks later, Anne died, leaving the throne to Sophia's 54-year-old son, George I. Like many winners of the genetic lottery that is hereditary monarchy, he was not well suited to the task. He was shy and wooden in public. His lack of charisma and general Germanness made him unpopular with his new subjects. It was widely reported that he hated the English and refused to learn their language. However, he did understand English well enough by the end of his life. There were Jacobite uprisings across the country and in Scotland, but the majority of Brits reluctantly accepted that George wasn't a terrible monarch. He did usher in the modern cabinet government and appointed the first prime minister, Sir Robert Walpole. But the king did have a skeleton in his closet, literally. He and his wife, Sophia Dorothea of Celle, never got along. Tired of his dalliances, she dared to take a lover of her own. George had the man murdered and, according to rumor, buried under the floor of his wife's dressing room. Then he had Sophia imprisoned, and she never saw her children again. Their eldest son, also named George, never forgave his father. Their bitter rivalry further blackened the king's reputation. While on a visit to Hanover, George received a letter from his wife, who had just died. Her final act was to curse him for his cruelty. After reading the letter, George suffered a stroke and died at 67. So what do you think? Was George I the best king Britain could have had? Or would one of the 41 rejected candidates have made a better British monarch? Let me know your vote in the comments. Exploring Bonnie, Scotland with an incredible group of fellow history lovers was such an amazing experience, and I can't wait to do it again. I'm excited to announce that my next adventure will be to Germany and Austria. Join me from May 13th to 20th, 2025 for a magnificent 8-day adventure through Munich, Salzburg, and Vienna. We'll explore fairy tale Neuschwanstein and Hohenschwangau castles, where fabulous King Ludwig II mysteriously died. See the stunning alpine vistas that inspired Mozart and The Sound of Music. Waltz in the footsteps of Empresses Maria Theresa and Sissi at decadent Schönbrunn Palace. We'll indulge in delightful culinary experiences, especially cheese and chocolate. The trip includes welcome and farewell dinners, hotel stays, breakfasts, in-country transportation, entrance fees, and the invaluable insight of a local guide. Plus, I'll be there to share historic stories and fun facts. Bring a buddy or fly solo. We'll all become friends along the way. If this sounds like music to your ears, then click the link in the description for more information and to be notified when the trip goes live for bookings on September 17th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and check out my other royal history videos. If you really want to help, please consider supporting me on Patreon. A link is in the description. Thank you for watching.